When the mountain man pulled the frozen 7-year-old from the snowdrift that January night, he had no idea she was worth $300 million dead, or that saving her life would expose the most powerful men in Montana and bring down an empire built on blood and lies. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The wind howled through the Montana Rockies like a living thing, angry and relentless, tearing at everything in its path. Marcus Reed stood on the porch of his timber cabin, watching the storm roll in from the north. He'd seen plenty of blizzards in his 48 years, especially the last 12 spent alone on this mountain. But something about this one felt different. The air had that electric quality, the kind that made animals go quiet and sent birds fleeing hours before the first flake fell. He pulled his wool-lined jacket tighter and checked the thermometer nailed to the porch post. 19 degrees and dropping fast. By midnight, it would hit 0, maybe lower. The kind of cold that killed. Marcus turned back inside, his boots heavy on the worn floorboards. The cabin was small but solid, built by his own hands from timber he'd cut and hauled himself. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, crackling with split pine. Shelves lined the others, filled with books, supplies, and the kind of order that came from living alone. No television, no internet, just a battery-powered radio that mostly played static and the occasional weather report. He'd chosen this isolation deliberately. After what happened in Denver 12 years ago, after Sarah and their daughter Lily, after the accident that tore his world apart, Marcus couldn't bear to be around people anymore. The search and rescue work he'd once loved, the purpose he'd built his life around, it all turned to ash the day he failed to save his own family. So he'd sold everything, bought this land, and disappeared into the wilderness where the only thing he had to save was himself. The radio crackled to life. Severe winter storm warning for Glacier County through 0200 hours. Winds up to 60 miles per hour, visibility near 0. Residents advised to stay indoors. Marcus moved to the window. The first snow was already falling, thick flakes that meant business. He'd stocked up 2 weeks ago, had enough firewood to last through March. Whatever this storm wanted to throw at him, he was ready. Except he wasn't. Around 8 that evening, as the blizzard reached its fury and the world outside became nothing but white chaos, Marcus heard something that made his blood stop cold, a sound that didn't belong, a child crying. He froze, one hand on the coffee mug he'd been lifting, the other gripping the arm of his chair. The wind could play tricks, make sounds that seemed human. He'd heard it before, branches scraping, animals calling, the mountain itself groaning under the weight of winter. But this was different. This cut through the storm like a blade. There it was again. Faint, desperate, unmistakable. Marcus was on his feet and grabbing his gear before his mind caught up to his body. Heavy parka, gloves, headlamp, rope. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 20 years in search and rescue, muscle memory overriding the rust of 12 years alone. He grabbed his pack, checked his emergency supplies, and pushed out into the storm. The cold hit him like a fist. The wind tore at his jacket, driving snow into his eyes despite the goggles. Visibility was less than 10 feet. He clicked on his headlamp and started moving in the direction of the crying, following the sound more than sight. "Hey!" he shouted into the wind. "Can you hear me? Where are you?" Nothing but the scream of the blizzard. He pushed forward, one boot in front of the other, the snow already mid-calf and getting deeper. The temperature had plummeted. His breath came out in white clouds that vanished instantly. Every instinct told him to turn back, that this was suicide, that no one could survive out here. But that crying, that small, terrified voice breaking through the storm. It took him 20 minutes to cover what should have been a 5-minute walk. The terrain sloped downward here, toward the creek bed that ran through his property. In summer, it was a peaceful spot. In winter, especially now, it was a death trap. Then his headlamp caught something, a splash of color against the white. Blue fabric. He ran, stumbling through drifts that grabbed at his legs. There, partially buried in snow against a fallen log, was a child. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, curled in a ball, her lips blue, her small body shaking violently. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus said, dropping to his knees beside her. "I've got you. You're going to be okay." Her eyes fluttered open. They were brown, huge with terror and pain. She tried to speak, but her teeth chattered too hard. Marcus didn't waste time with questions. He stripped off his outer parka and wrapped her in it, then scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a fragile bundle of frozen limbs and soaked clothing. Hypothermia, severe. He had maybe minutes, maybe less. The trip back to the cabin was the longest of his life. Each step fought against the storm, against the snow, against time itself. The girl had stopped shivering, which was worse. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. He talked to her the whole way, nonsense mostly, just keeping his voice steady and calm. "Stay with me, sweetheart. We're almost there. You're going to be warm soon. Just stay with me." When he finally crashed through his cabin door, he moved with the precision of someone who'd trained for exactly this scenario. He kicked the door shut, carried her straight to the fireplace, and laid her on the rug. Her clothes were soaked through, freezing against her skin. "I'm sorry," he said, even though she probably couldn't hear him. "I have to get these wet things off you." He worked quickly, removing her jacket. Expensive, he noticed even through his panic, North Face barely worn. Then her jeans, her sweater, her boots. Everything was designer quality, clean despite the mud and snow. Not the clothes of a lost hiker or a runaway from town. Underneath, more troubling signs, bruises on her arms, finger-shaped marks on her wrist, like someone had grabbed her hard. He pushed the questions aside. First, save her life. Everything else could wait. Marcus wrapped her in wool blankets from his bed, then sleeping bags, creating a cocoon of warmth. He heated water on the stove and soaked towels, placing them carefully against her neck, her underarms, her core. Not her extremities. Warming those first could send cold blood rushing to her heart and kill her. Her eyes opened again, focused on him with sudden clarity. "Am I dead?" she whispered. "No," Marcus said gently. "You're safe. What's your name?" "Emma." "Okay, Emma, I'm Marcus. You're in my cabin. You're going to be fine." "They'll find me," she said, and something in her voice made his skin crawl. Not relief, fear. "Who will find you?" But she'd already slipped back into unconsciousness. Marcus spent the next 4 hours monitoring her breathing, her pulse, the color returning slowly to her skin. He'd seen hypothermia victims before, knew the signs, knew the dangers. Around midnight, her shivering returned, which was good. Her fingers and toes showed no signs of frostbite, which was a miracle. He made hot broth from bouillon cubes and got small sips into her when she was alert enough. She didn't speak again, just watched him with those enormous, terrified eyes. When she finally fell into a deep sleep, Marcus allowed himself to step back and think. This made no sense. His cabin was 12 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by a rough trail that was impassable in winter. The closest town was Clearwater Ridge, population 800, another 15 miles beyond that. No one came up here accidentally, especially not a child alone in the middle of a blizzard. He examined her clothes, now hanging by the fire to dry. The labels confirmed his suspicion. Expensive brands, sized for a child, but clearly new. Her boots were barely scuffed. Everything about her spoke of money, care, a life very different from the rugged locals in Clearwater Ridge. The bruises troubled him most. Those weren't from a fall or from stumbling through the snow. Someone had hurt this girl before she ended up on his mountain. Marcus barely slept that night. He dozed in the chair by the fire, jerking awake every time Emma stirred. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crack and snap of ice-laden branches. Emma woke just after sunrise. Color had returned to her cheeks, though she still looked fragile, breakable. She sat up slowly, clutching the blankets around her. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Cold." He smiled. "That's normal. You were frozen pretty solid last night. Think you can eat something?" She nodded. He made oatmeal with brown sugar and raisins. the kind of simple comfort food that had gotten him through countless hard mornings. Emma ate slowly, mechanically, her eyes never leaving him. "Emma," he said gently, "I need to know how you got here. Where are your parents?" Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. "They're gone." "Gone where?" "Just gone. Forever gone." The way she said it made his chest tight. This wasn't a kid separated from her parents at a rest stop. This was deeper, darker. "Okay," he said carefully. "Is there someone I should call? Someone who's looking for you?" "No!" The word came out sharp, panicked. "You can't call anyone. They'll find me. They'll—" She stopped, breathing hard. Marcus kept his voice calm. "Who's trying to find you, sweetheart?" But Emma just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. The sound of an engine cut through the morning quiet. Marcus moved to the window and cursed under his breath. A Glacier County sheriff's truck was making its way up his road, chains on the tires, throwing up plumes of snow. "Someone's here," he said. Emma's reaction was immediate and visceral. She scrambled backward off the chair, eyes wild, looking for somewhere to hide. Hey, Marcus said, crouching down to her level. "It's okay. It's just Sheriff Daniels. He's a friend." "No," Emma whispered. "No police, please." But the truck was already pulling up outside. Marcus opened the door to find Tom Daniels climbing out, along with a woman Marcus didn't recognize. Tom was in his late 50s, weathered and solid, one of the few people from town Marcus still spoke to. They'd worked together on search and rescue operations back in the day. "Marcus," Tom said, his breath clouding in the cold air. "Got a strange call this morning. Family reported a missing child. Description matches someone who might have wandered up this way." "That's so?" Marcus said, not moving from the doorway. Tom's eyes narrowed. "You got someone in there, Marcus?" "Found a little girl, half frozen in the snow last night. Brought her in, treated her for hypothermia. She's stable." The woman stepped forward. She wore a county ID badge clipped to her jacket. "I'm Sarah Chen." She paused, then corrected herself. "Sarah Morrison, Child Protective Services. We need to see her." Marcus didn't budge. "She's been through hell. She needs rest." "Step aside, Marcus," Tom said, his voice firmer now. "This is official business." Marcus looked back into the cabin where Emma stood frozen in the middle of the room, her face pale, every muscle tensed to run. "It's okay," he told her, though he wasn't sure it was. Tom and Sarah entered, bringing cold air with them. Sarah approached Emma with a practiced smile, the kind social workers learned in training. "Hi, honey, my name's Sarah. We're here to help you." Emma said nothing. "Can you tell me your name?" Silence. Sarah glanced at Marcus. "How long has she been like this?" "She talked last night, told me her name was Emma. This morning she's more scared." "Emma," Sarah said, kneeling down, "we've been looking for you. Your family is very worried." "My family is dead," Emma said quietly. The words hung in the air. Sarah and Tom exchanged glances. "Honey," Sarah said carefully, "your aunt and uncle have been calling every agency in Montana trying to find you. They'll be so relieved you're safe." "I don't have an aunt and uncle." Sarah pulled out her phone, showed Emma a photo. "Is this you?" Marcus couldn't see the screen, but he saw Emma's reaction. Her face went white. She started shaking, and not from cold. "That's not me," she whispered. But the lie was transparent. "Emma," Tom said, his voice gentle but official, "we need to take you somewhere safe, get you checked out by a doctor, and contact your family." "No." The word was small but absolute. "It's not optional, sweetheart." Emma turned to Marcus, her eyes pleading. In that moment, something shifted inside him. He saw his own daughter Lily in those eyes, saw the terror and the trust, and every protective instinct he'd buried for 12 years roared back to life. "Tom," Marcus said, "can I talk to you outside?" They stepped onto the porch. The morning sun was bright on the snow, almost blinding. "Something's not right here," Marcus said quietly. I know she's scared, but that's normal after what she's been through. It's more than that. Look at her clothes. He gestured back inside. Designer labels, everything new. But she's got bruises on her arms, Tom, finger marks, and she's more terrified of being found than she was of dying in a blizzard. Tom's jaw tightened. You're not suggesting... I'm suggesting we slow down. Give me 48 hours to figure out what's really going on before we hand her off to people she's clearly terrified of. I can't do that, Marcus. There are procedures, protocols. She needs medical attention, proper care. I can provide that. I kept people alive in worse conditions than this for 20 years. That was a lifetime ago. The words stung because they were true. Marcus gripped the porch railing. She told me last night that they'll find her. Not her family. Not people who love her. She's running from something, Tom. Tom was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the snow-covered mountains. Finally, he sighed. 24 hours. That's all I can give you. I'll tell CPS she needs rest before transport, that moving her too soon could be medically risky. But tomorrow morning, I'm coming back, and she goes into proper custody. Understood? Understood. Tom paused at his truck. Don't make me regret this, Marcus. And for God's sake, be careful. Whatever you think you're protecting her from, you might be wrong. Or I might be right. After they left, Marcus found Emma sitting on the floor by the fireplace, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd folded in on herself. They're gone, he said. She looked up at him. They'll come back. Tomorrow. But we've got until then. He sat down across from her, keeping his distance, his voice gentle. Emma, I need you to talk to me. I can't help you if I don't understand what's happening. You can't help me, she said. Nobody can. Try me. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, my daddy found something bad. Papers, numbers, things that weren't supposed to be there. He told Mummy we had to tell someone, but she was scared. She said the people he found out about were dangerous. They argued about it for days. Her voice cracked. Then one night men came to our house. I heard shouting, glass breaking. Mummy told me to run, to hide. I went out my window and I ran and ran. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. When was this? I don't know, a long time, days maybe. I walked and walked. I hid when I saw cars. Then the snow started and I got so cold, and then you found me. Your parents, Marcus said carefully. What happened to them? Emma's eyes filled with tears. The news said Daddy killed Mummy and then himself. But that's a lie. He would never. Those men killed them. And now they're looking for me because I saw one of their faces. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus had spent 12 years avoiding the world, avoiding responsibility, avoiding anything that might force him to care again. But now, here was this child, this broken, terrified little girl, telling him a story that sounded insane except for one thing. She believed it absolutely. What happens next will test everything Marcus thought he left behind, reveal a conspiracy that reaches higher than anyone imagined, and force a broken man to become a protector once more. If you're gripped by this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus stood and moved to his small desk in the corner. He pulled out an old laptop, one he rarely used, and fired it up. The satellite internet was slow, but it worked. What was your daddy's name, Emma? She hesitated. David. David Morrison. Marcus typed the name into a search engine. What came up made his blood run cold. Multiple news articles from 6 days ago. Headlines screaming, Murder-Suicide Rocks Helena Community. Forensic accountant kills wife. Self in apparent domestic dispute. Daughter missing after parents' deaths. He clicked through to the full story. David Morrison, age 38, forensic accountant. Found dead in his Helena home alongside his wife Jennifer, age 36. Their daughter Emma, age 7, missing and presumed endangered. A massive search was underway. But it was the next part that made Marcus's hands shake. The Morrisons lived in an upscale neighborhood in Helena, over 800 miles from Marcus's mountain cabin. 800 miles. She was 7 years old, and had somehow made it 800 miles through Montana winter. Unless someone had brought her here. Unless she'd been running from something so terrifying that 800 miles wasn't far enough. He scrolled further, found photos of the couple smiling at some charity event. David Morrison had sharp eyes and an accountant's careful expression. Jennifer was beautiful, her arm around her husband, protective rather than decorative. And there, in a school photo, was Emma. Same brown eyes, same delicate features, but in the picture, she was smiling, whole, unbroken. "They're saying your daddy hurt your mummy," Marcus said gently. "That's what the news reports say." "I know," Emma whispered. "That's how they do it. Make it look like something it's not. So nobody asks questions." "Who's they, Emma?" "I don't know their names, but they wore nice suits. They had guns under their jackets. One of them came to our house before when Daddy was showing him papers. They shook hands and smiled, but Daddy looked scared after." Marcus leaned back in his chair. Every rational part of his brain said this was a traumatized child creating a narrative to cope with an unbearable reality. Kids did that. They invented stories, conspiracies, anything to avoid facing a truth too painful to accept. But 12 years alone had taught Marcus to trust his gut, and his gut was screaming that Emma was telling the truth. He opened a new search window and typed, "David Morrison Forensic Accountant Investigation." Several hits came up. Morrison had testified as an expert witness in numerous fraud cases. He'd helped the FBI crack embezzlement schemes, money laundering operations, complex financial crimes. He was good at finding money people wanted hidden, and now he was dead. Marcus thought about those expensive clothes Emma was wearing, thought about how far she'd traveled, thought about the bruises on her arms and the absolute terror in her eyes when she thought the police were taking her. He looked at Emma, still curled by the fire, watching him with those huge, haunted eyes. "If what you're saying is true," he said carefully, "then the people looking for you right now, the ones claiming to be your aunt and uncle, they're not really family, are they?" Emma shook her head. "I don't have any aunts or uncles. Daddy was an only child. Mummy's sister died when I was little." "Then who are they?" "The people who want me gone." Marcus stood and paced the small cabin. He'd spent 12 years running from exactly this kind of situation, from responsibility, from risk, from the possibility of failing someone again. After Lily died, after he couldn't save his own daughter from a simple car accident because he was across town on a rescue call, he'd sworn never to put himself in that position again. But here was Emma, and here was the choice. Let her go with people who terrified her, trust the system that seemed determined to hand her over without asking the right questions. Go back to his quiet, safe, solitary life. Or fight. He looked at Emma again and saw something that made his decision. She was arranging small stones from the fireplace in a pattern on the floor, concentrating hard. When she noticed him watching, she looked up. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Daddy taught me. If I'm ever lost and can't talk, I should leave signs." She pointed at the stones. "These are numbers, see? These 3 stones mean 300. These mean 0. Together it's numbers Daddy said were important." Marcus crouched beside her pattern. 300 million. At least, that's what it looked like she was trying to communicate. "Where did you hear these numbers, Emma?" "Daddy said them on the phone. He was talking to someone, said he found 300 million missing. Said people were going to jail. $300 million. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Marcus had worked enough cases in his search and rescue days to know that people killed for a lot less than 300 million. Hell, he'd found bodies in these mountains over disputes about a few $1,000s in drug money. But 300 million? That was the kind of money that bought silence. That bought fake murder-suicides. That bought entire law enforcement agencies, if necessary. "Emma," he said, "did your daddy keep any papers at home? Anything hidden?" "He had a safe behind the painting in his office." "Do you know what was in it?" She nodded. "Computer drive, the small kind. He put it there the night before. Before everything." Marcus sat back on his heels. A forensic accountant discovers a $300 million fraud, gathers evidence, hides a drive, gets killed before he can report it. His daughter witnesses something and runs, and now someone was trying very hard to find her and make her disappear. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture Marcus didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. He pulled out his phone and looked at the single bar of satellite signal. He could call Tom Daniels back, lay all this out, let the proper authorities handle it. Except if Emma was right, the proper authorities might be part of the problem. He thought about the couple who'd claimed to be Emma's aunt and uncle. Thought about how quickly CPS had shown up. 800 miles away, a child goes missing after her parents' deaths, and within days someone tracks her to a remote mountain cabin in the middle of nowhere. That wasn't normal procedure. That was targeted searching. Someone knew she was here, or strongly suspected. Marcus made his decision. "Emma," he said, "I'm going to help you, but I need you to trust me and I need you to be completely honest. Can you do that?" She nodded, those brown eyes searching his face. "Good. First thing, we need to make you safe. This cabin isn't secure enough." He stood and started pulling gear from closets. "We're going to move to my winter cache. It's about 5 miles deeper into the mountains in a place nobody knows about. We'll be safe there while I figure out what to do." "Why are you helping me?" Emma asked quietly. Marcus stopped, a sleeping bag in his hands, and looked at her, really looked at her. 7 years old, alone, running from killers, with nothing but her wits and courage keeping her alive. He saw Lily in her face, saw the daughter he'd failed, and knew that whatever came next, he couldn't fail again. "Because," he said simply, "it's the right thing to do." As they packed supplies for the trek deeper into the wilderness, Marcus allowed himself one last moment of doubt. He was about to walk away from his quiet life, his safety, his carefully constructed isolation. He was about to put himself between a 7-year-old girl and people willing to kill for $300 million. But when Emma slipped her small hand into his, trusting him completely, the doubt vanished. They left the cabin just after noon, Marcus carrying a heavy pack, Emma bundled in layers of warm clothes. He didn't lock the door. If someone came looking, he wanted them to think he'd just stepped out. As they climbed higher into the mountains, into the deep snow and bitter cold, Marcus looked back once at the only home he'd known for 12 years. Then he turned forward and didn't look back again. The real journey was just beginning. The winter cache sat in a hollow beneath a granite overhang, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Marcus had built it 7 years ago during a particularly harsh winter, a backup shelter for emergencies, stone walls on 3 sides, a low roof timbered and insulated, a small wood stove vented through a crack in the rock that dispersed smoke so it was nearly invisible. It was crude compared to his cabin, but it was warm, dry, and most importantly, hidden. Emma collapsed onto the bedroll Marcus laid out for her, exhausted from the 5-mile trek through deep snow. Her cheeks were flushed from exertion, her breathing heavy but steady. She'd kept up without complaint, following in his footsteps, trusting him completely. "Rest," Marcus said, lighting the small stove. "I'm going to set up perimeter markers." "What are those?" "Tripwires with bells. Old search and rescue trick. If anyone comes within 100 yards of this place, we'll know." Emma nodded, her eyelids already drooping. Within minutes, she was asleep. Marcus spent the next 2 hours setting his warning system, stringing thin wire between trees at ankle height, attaching small bells he'd carried in his pack. Then he covered their tracks as best he could, breaking branches to disguise the trail, sweeping snow over footprints. It wouldn't fool a professional tracker, but it would slow them down. When he returned to the cache, Emma was awake, sitting up and drawing in a small notebook he'd given her. "What are you working on?" he asked. She held it up. A surprisingly detailed sketch of a house, large, modern, with tall windows and a circular driveway. "That's where we lived," she said. "In Helena. Daddy's office was on the 2nd floor, the room on the right." Marcus studied the drawing. The detail was remarkable for a 7-year-old. She'd even included the tree beside the driveway, the mailbox, the lamp by the front door. "You're a good artist." "Daddy said I got it from Mummy. She painted." Emma's voice wavered on the past tense. Marcus sat down across from her, the stove crackling between them. Emma, I need you to tell me everything you remember about that night. I know it's hard, but it's important. She set down the notebook, her small hands folding in her lap. For a long moment, she said nothing, and Marcus wondered if he'd pushed too hard. Then she began to speak, her voice small but steady. It was late. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard Daddy on the phone. He sounded upset. He kept saying, I have proof and people need to know. When he hung up, I heard him talking to Mummy downstairs. She was crying. She said it was too dangerous, that we should leave, go somewhere safe. Emma's hands tightened. Daddy said we couldn't run forever, that these people had to be stopped. He said he was going to the FBI in the morning, that he had everything they needed on the drive. What happened then? I went back to bed. But later, I woke up to glass breaking, loud voices downstairs, men's voices, not Daddy's. I heard Mummy scream, and I ran to my door, but she was already there. Her face was bleeding. She pushed me back into my room and locked the door. She said, run, baby, window, run and don't stop. Tears streamed down Emma's face now, but she kept talking. I heard more crashing, Daddy shouting, then a sound like fireworks but inside the house. Pop, 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 then nothing, just silence. Marcus felt his chest constrict. You climbed out the window? Emma nodded. There's a tree right next to it. I climbed down like Daddy taught me. I ran to the woods behind our house. I hid there until morning. Then I saw police cars and ambulances, and I knew Mummy and Daddy were gone. How did you get all the way here, Emma? That's 800 miles. I walked to the highway. A truck driver stopped, asked if I was okay. I told him my grandma lived in Missoula and my mum was meeting me there. He was going that way, so he gave me a ride. Dropped me at a gas station. I hid in the back of another truck heading north. Then I walked. When I got cold, I hid in barns or empty buildings. I found food in dumpsters. Marcus stared at her, amazed and heartbroken. This 7-year-old child had survived a cross-state journey alone in winter, evading whoever was hunting her, living on nothing but instinct and will. You're incredibly brave, he said quietly. I'm not brave. I'm scared all the time. Bravery isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway. Emma wiped her eyes. Are you scared? Marcus considered lying, decided against it. Yes, but we're going to figure this out together. Over the next 3 days, they fell into a rhythm. Marcus would wake before dawn, check the perimeter, make breakfast. Emma would draw or read from the small collection of books he'd stored in the cache. In the afternoons, he taught her wilderness skills, how to start a fire, how to read tracks in snow, how to find north without a compass. She absorbed everything with fierce concentration, like each lesson might save her life someday, because it might. On the 4th day, Marcus hiked back toward his cabin alone, moving carefully through the trees, staying off the trail. From a distance, hidden in the pines, he watched his home through binoculars. 2 black SUVs were parked in his driveway. 4 men in dark clothes moved through his cabin with professional efficiency, searching, not cops. Their movements were too coordinated, too military. One spoke into a radio clipped to his shoulder. Another took photographs of everything. Marcus's grip tightened on the binoculars. Emma had been right. These weren't people trying to help a lost child. These were cleaners, hunters. He watched for 20 minutes, memorizing faces, noting details. Then he slipped away as quietly as he'd come. Back at the cache, he found Emma teaching herself to tie knots from a field manual he'd left her. They came, he said simply. Her hands stopped mid-knot. Did they see you? No, but they're serious, Emma. Professionals. I told you. I know. I'm sorry I didn't fully believe you before. That night, as Emma slept, Marcus sat by the dying fire and made a list of what he knew. David Morrison, forensic accountant, discovers $300 million fraud. Gathers evidence, hides a drive. Gets killed along with his wife, staged as murder-suicide. Daughter escapes, becomes loose end. Professional team deployed to find her. The questions: who was being defrauded? Where did the money come from? Who had the resources and motivation to kill for it? He needed help, someone he could trust, someone outside the obvious channels. At first light, he made the 6-mile hike to the nearest point where his satellite phone had reliable signal. He scrolled through his limited contacts, stopped at one name, Grace Whitmore. Grace had been the librarian in Clearwater Ridge for 30 years before retiring. More importantly, she'd been the one person in town who'd never treated Marcus like a broken thing after he'd moved to the mountain. She brought him books, invited him to town events he never attended, and respected his need for solitude while making sure he knew he wasn't forgotten. If anyone could help him research David Morrison without raising red flags, it was Grace. He dialed. She answered on the third ring. "Marcus Reed, as I live and breathe, I heard you found that missing girl." "I did. Grace, I need your help, but what I'm about to ask you could be dangerous." A pause. Then, "I'm 72 years old and I've survived 2 husbands and 3 rounds of chemo. Dangerous doesn't scare me anymore. What do you need?" "Information on a man named David Morrison. He was a forensic accountant from Helena. I need to know what cases he was working on, who he might have made enemies with." "This is about the girl?" "Yes. The official story is her father killed her mother and himself. The official story is wrong." Another pause, longer this time. "You're sure about this?" "Emma was there, Grace. She saw them killed. She's been running ever since." "Dear God." Grace's voice hardened with resolve. "Give me 48 hours. I've got friends at the state archives, contacts at the university. I'll be discreet." "Grace, if anyone asks, you were never on this call and I'm just a curious old woman with too much time on her hands. I've been playing that role for years. It's quite effective." Marcus smiled, despite everything. "Thank you." "Marcus, keep that little girl safe, and keep yourself safe too." He returned to the cache to find Emma awake and agitated, pacing the small space. "You were gone so long," she said, relief flooding her face. "I had to make a call. I've got someone helping us now." "Who?" "A friend. Someone I trust." Over the next 2 days, Marcus worked on making the cache more livable. He reinforced the walls with extra timber, improved the ventilation, created a hidden storage space for supplies. Emma helped, handing him tools, holding boards steady, asking questions about everything. In the quiet moments, they talked. Emma told him about her life before. Ballet lessons she loved, math class she hated, her best friend Sophie, who had a pet rabbit. Marcus found himself sharing too. Stories about his search and rescue days, about the mountains, even carefully about Lily. "She was 8 when she died," he said one evening as they ate stew over the fire. "Car accident. I was on a call, trying to save someone else's kid from a climbing fall. By the time I got to the hospital, she was gone." "That's not your fault," Emma said quietly. "I tell myself that. Doesn't always help." "My daddy used to say some things just happen, that we can't control everything, we can only control what we do next." Marcus looked at this remarkable child, orphaned and hunted, offering him wisdom beyond her years. "Your daddy was a smart man. He was the best daddy in the world." The satellite phone rang just after dawn on the 6th day. Marcus answered to find Grace's voice, tight with urgency. "Marcus, you need to hear this. I've been digging into David Morrison's work history. 3 months ago, he was consulting on a state audit, routine stuff, checking contracts for the Department of Natural Resources. And he found discrepancies in a mining contract. Blackstone Ridge Mining Company was awarded exploration rights to 8,000 acres of state land in Glacier County. The contract was worth $240 million over 15 years. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. Glacier County, his county. "But here's where it gets interesting," Grace continued. "The contract approval process was rushed through in record time. Usually takes 18 months. This one took 6 weeks. And the company that bid against Blackstone and lost. Their bid was actually lower and included better environmental protections. Someone rigged the contract." "It gets worse. I pulled property records. Blackstone Ridge owns 42,000 acres in the area. including the land surrounding your mountain. They've been buying up parcels for the last 5 years through shell companies. Marcus stood, mind racing. They're planning something big. What Marcus discovers next will change everything, revealing why powerful men want this little girl silenced, and why the $300 million is just the beginning of a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of state government. If you're gripped by this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. There's more, Grace said. I have a contact at the EPA. Off the record, they've had complaints about illegal dumping in the Blackstone Ridge sites, toxic waste, mining runoff, but every investigation gets shut down before it starts. Who's shutting them down? That's what David Morrison was trying to find out. I found a draft report on his computer. His widow gave me access before she died, thinking I was writing a memorial piece. Morrison traced the money through 6 shell companies, all ultimately owned by a holding company called Apex Resource Management. Who owns Apex? That's where the trail goes cold. It's buried under so many corporate layers it would take a forensic accountant to... Grace stopped. Oh God, that's why they killed him. He figured out who owns Apex. And whatever he found is on that drive Emma mentioned. Marcus looked toward the cache where Emma was still sleeping. 800 miles she'd run, and she'd landed practically on top of the very land at the center of the conspiracy her father had uncovered. Grace, I need you to find out everything you can about Blackstone Ridge mining, who runs it, what they're planning, any connections to state officials. Marcus, if what we're thinking is true, this goes high, very high. People with this kind of power, they have resources, they have people everywhere. I know, be careful. You too. That little girl is lucky she found you. After the call, Marcus sat in the pre-dawn darkness, thinking. The pieces were coming together, but the picture they formed was terrifying. A massive mining operation on state land, awarded through a rigged contract. Illegal dumping, money laundering, $300 million, probably more. A forensic accountant who discovered it all, and a 7-year-old witness who needed to disappear. The sun was rising when Emma emerged from the cache, rubbing her eyes. I heard you talking, she said. Marcus decided she deserved the truth. He explained everything Grace had found, watching Emma's face as she processed it. So the bad people, she said slowly, they want to dig in the mountains? Here? Yes, and they're putting poison in the ground. It looks that way. Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the snow-covered peaks glowing pink in the dawn light. Daddy always said people who hurt the earth for money don't care who they hurt. He said someone has to stand up to them. He was right. Then we have to stop them. We have to get the drive from Daddy's safe and show everyone what they did. Marcus shook his head. Emma, that house is 800 miles away. It's probably under surveillance. We can't. We have to. Her voice was steel. Daddy died for that drive. Mummy died protecting it. If we don't get it, they win. They get away with it. Marcus looked at this 7-year-old child, this small, fierce warrior, and saw a determination that humbled him. Even if we could get to Helena, he said carefully, getting into that house would be nearly impossible. I know how to get in. I know where all the cameras are. I know which window doesn't lock right. I know the code to the safe. Emma, please. Her eyes locked on his. I can't let them make Daddy look like a bad person. I can't let Mummy's death mean nothing. Please, Marcus. He wanted to say no. Every rational part of his brain screamed to keep her hidden, wait for Grace to find evidence another way, let the proper authorities handle it. But he'd spent 12 years running from responsibility, from risk, from the possibility of failure. And where had it gotten him? Alone on a mountain, hiding from life. Emma wasn't asking him to keep her safe. She was asking him to help her fight. If we do this, he said finally, we do it my way, carefully, with a plan. Emma's face lit up with hope. Okay. First, we need more information. We need to know exactly who we're up against. Over the next week, Marcus and Grace worked in careful coordination. She dug deeper into Blackstone Ridge mining, finding connections that made Marcus's blood run cold. The CEO was Victor Kane, a ruthless businessman with a history of environmental violations and suspicious deaths surrounding his projects. 2 whistleblowers from previous Kane operations had died in accidents. One fell from a building, another drove off a cliff. Kane had political connections that spiderwebbed across the state. Campaign contributions to senators, the governor, judges. He sat on boards, attended fundraisers, had his picture taken with people who made laws. But the real breakthrough came when Grace found the name of the state official who'd fast-tracked Blackstone's contract. James Sullivan, director of the Department of Natural Resources. Marcus recognized the name immediately. Sullivan had a cabin 15 miles from Marcus's own place. He'd seen him in Clearwater Ridge, always with an entourage, always acting like he owned the town. Morrison must have found the connection between Kane and Sullivan, Grace said over the phone. Proof that Sullivan rigged the contract in exchange for money. How much money are we talking about? Based on the discrepancies Morrison flagged, at least 300 million, probably more, and that's just the initial fraud. If Blackstone gets those mining rights, they'll make billions over the next decade, all while poisoning the watershed for half of Montana. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. These people had killed for money, staged a murder-suicide, hunted a child, and planned to destroy pristine wilderness for profit. "We need that drive," he said. "It's too dangerous, Marcus. If what Morrison documented is as damning as we think, they'll be watching that house around the clock. Then we'll need a distraction." That night, Marcus sat Emma down and laid out the situation honestly. "The people we're fighting are powerful. They have money, connections, resources. They've killed before and they'll kill again. If we go after that drive, we're putting ourselves in danger." "I know," Emma said. "There's another option. Grace has a friend, a federal prosecutor in Seattle. We could get you to her, tell her everything you know, let the professionals handle it. Without the drive, it's just my word, a kid's word against rich people. Who's going to believe me?" She was right, and Marcus knew it. "Then we get the drive," he said, "but we do this smart. I'll go to Helena, scout the house, find a way in. You stay here where it's safe." "No," Emma's voice was firm. "I have to come. I'm the only one who knows which safe, which painting, the exact code, and if we get separated, you won't know what you're looking for." Emma. "Marcus, I've been running for weeks. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of hiding. This is my fight. Let me fight." Marcus saw his own daughter in her face, heard Lily's voice in Emma's defiance. How many times had Lily insisted on coming on hikes that were too hard, climbs that were too dangerous, adventures that scared him? And how many times had he said yes because he respected her courage? "Your daddy would be so proud of you," he said quietly. "So would yours, I bet." They spent the next 3 days preparing. Marcus taught Emma evasion techniques, code words, emergency protocols. If anything went wrong, she was to run to a predetermined meeting point and wait. If he didn't show within 24 hours, she was to find Grace and tell her everything. Emma absorbed it all with grim focus. She practiced picking locks with tools Marcus fashioned from wire. She memorized maps of Helena. She drew and redrew her house layout until Marcus could navigate it blind. On the evening before they planned to leave, as Emma slept, Marcus's satellite phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Problem. Sullivan's office issued permits for Blackstone to begin preliminary drilling. They're starting operations in 2 weeks, on your mountain." Marcus stepped outside into the cold night air. He looked out at the peaks, silver under moonlight, pristine and ancient. In 2 weeks, drills would tear into them. Waste would seep into streams. The wilderness he'd called home for 12 years would be poisoned for profit. Unless he stopped it. He thought about Tom Daniels's warning. You might be wrong. About the safe, easy choice to let Emma go, to trust the system, to go back to his quiet life. But standing there under the stars, thinking about David Morrison, who died trying to expose the truth, about Jennifer Morrison, who died protecting her daughter, about Emma, who'd survived 800 miles of winter to escape murderers, Marcus knew there was no going back. Some fights chose you. This one had chosen him the moment he'd pulled Emma from that snowdrift. The next morning, he loaded supplies into a pack, food, water, emergency gear, and the .45 he'd kept from his rescue days, cleaned and loaded. "You know how to use this?" Emma asked, staring at the gun. "Yes, but I hope I won't have to." They set out at dawn, taking a route that avoided roads, moving through wilderness toward the highway 20 miles south. From there, they'd hitch a ride with one of the long-haul truckers who sometimes gave Marcus supplies in exchange for weather reports and trail conditions. The hike took 2 days. Emma kept pace without complaint, following in Marcus's footsteps, silent and determined. They slept in a natural shelter the first night, huddled together for warmth, watching stars wheel overhead. "Marcus?" Emma said into the darkness. "Yeah?" "What happens after? If we get the drive, if we stop the bad people, what happens to me?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, sweetheart. The state will probably place you with a foster family. Good people who'll take care of you." "Could you do it? Take care of me?" His chest tightened. "Emma, I live alone on a mountain. I'm not qualified to—" "You saved my life. You believed me when nobody else did. You're teaching me to be strong. That sounds pretty qualified to me." Marcus stared up at the stars, feeling 12 years of carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "Let's get through this first," he said. "Then we'll figure out the rest." But lying there in the darkness, listening to Emma's breathing slow into sleep, Marcus realized something had already changed. For 12 years he'd been hiding from life, from pain, from the possibility of loss. Emma had reminded him what it meant to fight for something, to protect someone, to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance. And come hell or high water, he was going to make sure she got hers too. The truck driver who picked them up at the highway rest stop was named Dale, a weathered man in his 60s who hauled lumber across 3 states and asked no questions. Marcus had helped him chain up during a blizzard 2 winters back, and Dale remembered. "Helena, you say?" Dale shifted gears as the semi climbed the mountain pass. "That's a long way from your usual territory, Marcus." "Family business," Marcus said simply. Dale glanced at Emma, curled against Marcus's side, pretending to sleep. "She yours?" "She is now." Dale nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "World's a hard place for kids these days. Good she's got you." They rode in comfortable silence for 300 miles, the highway unspooling beneath them. Emma actually did sleep for stretches, her head against Marcus's shoulder, her small hand gripping his jacket even in unconsciousness. Every time she shifted, Marcus felt the weight of what they were about to do pressing harder on his chest. They were 2 people going up against an organization wealthy enough to buy politicians and ruthless enough to murder. If this went wrong, they wouldn't just fail, they'd disappear. Dale dropped them at a truck stop outside Helena just after midnight. "You need anything, Marcus, you call. I still owe you for that blizzard." "We're square, Dale, but thank you." They watched the semi's taillights disappear into the darkness. Then Marcus led Emma to a budget motel on the edge of town. He paid cash, signed a fake name, and got a room on the ground floor with a window that opened onto the parking lot. Inside, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking very small and very young. "We're really doing this," she whispered. "We don't have to. We can still call Grace's prosecutor friend. Tell them what we know." Emma shook her head. "Without proof, it's nothing, just stories." Marcus sat beside her. "I need you to understand something. What we're about to do is dangerous. There's a real chance we could get caught. If that happens, if they grab me, you run. You don't look back, you don't try to save me. You run to the meeting point we discussed and you wait for Grace. Promise me." "I promise," Emma said. But Marcus could see the lie in her eyes. This child who'd crossed 800 miles alone wouldn't abandon him. He'd just have to make sure it didn't come to that. They spent the next day scouting. Marcus rented a nondescript sedan with cash and a fake ID he'd kept from his old life, a reminder of a time when he'd needed to disappear quickly during mountain rescues in disputed territories. They drove past the Morrison house 3 times, Marcus noting everything. The house was exactly as Emma had drawn it. 2 stories, modern architecture, situated on a quiet street in an upscale neighborhood. A "for sale" sign stood in the yard, slightly crooked. Yellow crime scene tape still crisscrossed the front door. More concerning were the signs of surveillance. A white van parked down the street, windows tinted, engine running. A man in a suit sitting on a bench across from the house pretending to read a newspaper. Security cameras mounted on neighboring homes, angles suggesting they covered the Morrison property. "They're watching it," Marcus said quietly. "Can we still get in?" "Maybe, but not during the day." That evening, they ate at a diner 6 blocks from the Morrison house. Emma picked at her food, anxiety rolling off her in waves. "Tell me about the safe again," Marcus said, keeping his voice low. "Master bedroom, behind the painting of the sailboat. It's a digital safe 8-digit code. Daddy's birthday backwards, 071319776. And the drive is definitely inside? Unless someone already found it. But Daddy was smart. The safe looks like the regular kind from outside, but it's got a false bottom. You have to press down on the base after you open it, then slide it forward. That's where he kept important things." Marcus marveled again at this child's composure, her attention to detail. 7 years old, and she understood operational security better than most adults. "What about alarms?" he asked. "There's a system, but Daddy always forgot to set it. He said it was annoying." Emma paused. "But the bad people might have added more security." "Probably." Marcus thought for a moment. "We'll need to assume the house is wired with motion sensors, maybe cameras. The question is whether they're actively monitored or just recording." "How do we find out?" "We test them, carefully." At 2 in the morning, they approached the Morrison house from the rear, moving through backyards, staying in shadows. The neighborhood slept, houses dark, streets empty. The white van was still there, but the man on the bench had been replaced by a different watcher, this one in a car. Marcus led Emma through a neighbor's yard, over a fence, into the greenbelt behind the Morrison property. The house loomed before them, dark and silent, a monument to violence and loss. Emma pointed to a second-floor window. "My room. The tree branch almost touches it." Marcus studied the oak tree, its winter-bare branches reaching toward the house like skeletal fingers. "You climbed down that?" "The night Mummy told me to run. There are good handholds." "Can you do it again? Going up this time?" Emma nodded, though Marcus saw fear flash across her face. "I'll go first," he said. "Make sure it's safe." The climb was trickier than he'd expected. The branches were slick with frost, and his adult weight made them creak and bend in ways that terrified him. But he made it to the window, tested it gently. Locked. He pulled out a thin blade, slid it between the window and frame, worked the catch. The lock popped with a soft click. Marcus held his breath, waiting for alarms, for lights, for voices. Nothing. He eased the window open and slipped inside, landing softly on carpet. Emma's room was exactly as she'd left it, frozen in time. Stuffed animals on the bed, books on shelves, drawings taped to walls. A layer of dust covered everything, and the air smelled stale, unlived in. Marcus leaned out the window and helped Emma up. She climbed with surprising agility, fearless despite the 15-foot drop beneath her. When she tumbled through the window into his arms, she was trembling. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Just cold." They stood in the darkness, listening. The house was silent except for the settling sounds old homes make, the creak of wood, the tick of pipes. But something felt wrong. The air was too still, too expectant. "Stay close," Marcus breathed. They crept to the bedroom door. Emma's hand found his, gripping tight. Beyond the door, the hallway stretched dark and empty. Family photos lined the walls. Emma as a baby, Emma's first day of school, the Morrison family at the beach, all smiling, all gone. Emma's breathing hitched. Marcus squeezed her hand. "Master bedroom," he whispered. "End of the hall, right side." They moved like ghosts, staying to the edges where floorboards were less likely to creak. Every shadow seemed threatening, every sound amplified. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. The master bedroom door stood ajar. Through the gap, Marcus could see moonlight falling across a large bed, its covers rumpled and pushed aside. Crime scene markers still dotted the floor, small yellow numbers on plastic stands. Emma made a small sound, and Marcus realized what she was seeing. The place where her parents died, where she'd last heard their voices. "You can wait here," he whispered. "No." Her voice was steel. "I have to do this." They entered together. The room smelled of dust and something else, something chemical and wrong. Blood had been cleaned from the carpet, but Marcus could see the faint stains where it had soaked through. Emma pointed to the wall opposite the bed. A painting hung there, an impressionist seascape with a sailboat cutting through blue waves. Marcus crossed to it, lifted it carefully from its hooks. Behind it, set into the wall, was a digital safe. Standard model, 8-digit keypad, no visible signs of tampering. 07131976, Emma whispered. Marcus entered the code. The safe beeped once, and the lock disengaged with a soft click. He pulled the door open, revealing the interior, empty except for a few documents and a jewelry box. "The false bottom," Emma reminded him. Marcus pressed down on the base of the safe interior. It gave slightly under pressure. He slid it forward, and it moved, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside lay a small external hard drive, black and unassuming, no bigger than a deck of cards. Marcus picked it up, turned it over. A strip of tape on the back had 2 words written in neat handwriting. "The truth." "We got it," Emma breathed. That's when the lights came on, bright, blinding, flooding the room with harsh white light. Marcus spun, instinctively pushing Emma behind him. A man stood in the doorway, late 40s, expensive suit, cold eyes. Behind him, 2 more men in tactical gear, weapons drawn. "Marcus Reed," the man in the suit said, his voice smooth and cultured. "We've been waiting for you." Marcus's hand moved toward the gun in his jacket, but the tactical team raised their weapons in unison. "I wouldn't," the suit said. "We just want to talk, and we want what you're holding." Marcus's mind raced. They'd been set up. Somehow someone had known they were coming. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, buying time. "My name is Victor Kane. I believe you've been researching my company." Kane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm impressed you made it this far. 800 miles with a child in winter. That takes dedication." "Let her go. This is between us." Kane laughed. "I'm afraid that's not how this works. You see, young Emma is the only witness to an unfortunate family tragedy. We can't have her spreading stories. Stories about how you murdered her parents." "Is that what she told you? I'm afraid you've been misled. David Morrison was a troubled man. He killed his wife in a fit of rage, then himself. Very tragic." "That's a lie!" Emma shouted from behind Marcus. Kane's eyes flicked to her, cold and reptilian. Poor child, traumatized, making up fantasies to cope with the unbearable truth. "The drive proves it," Marcus said. "Everything Morrison found, the rigged contracts, the money laundering, the illegal dumping, it's all there. A drive that conveniently has no chain of custody, obtained by a man with no legal authority from a sealed crime scene. Do you really think that would hold up in court?" Kane took a step forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me that drive. Then you and Emma are going to have an unfortunate accident on your way back to the mountains. Tragic, really. A rescue gone wrong." Marcus felt Emma's small hand gripping the back of his jacket. His mind worked furiously. They were on the 2nd floor. 2 armed men blocked the only door. The window behind them led to a 15-foot drop onto hard ground. "I've got a better idea," Marcus said. "We walk out of here, and I don't send copies of this drive to every news outlet in the state." Kane's smile widened. "You're bluffing. You haven't had time to copy it." "No, but Grace Whitmore has. She's had access to Morrison's files for over a week now, and if we don't check in with her by 0300 hours, she sends everything to the FBI, the EPA, and the Seattle Times." It was a complete lie, but Marcus sold it with every ounce of conviction he had. Kane's smile faltered. "You're lying." "Am I?" Grace Whitmore, retired librarian, 72 years old, lives at 312 Mountain View Lane in Clearwater Ridge. She's been digging into your operation for days. You want to bet your entire empire on whether I'm lying?" Kane's jaw tightened. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the sound of Emma's frightened breathing. Then Kane nodded to his men. "Stand down, for now." The tactical team lowered their weapons slightly, though they remained alert. "You've bought yourself some time," Kane said. "But understand this, even if you release those files, I have lawyers who will tie this up in court for years. I have friends in places you can't imagine. You're one man with a stolen drive and a traumatized child's testimony. I'm a pillar of the business community with unlimited resources." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I'm also the man who's about to make you famous for all the wrong reasons." Kane's eyes narrowed. "I could kill you both right now." "You could, but then Grace definitely sends those files. And killing us in the Morrison house? That's going to raise questions, hard questions." Kane studied Marcus for a long, terrible moment. Then he stepped aside. "Get out, but this isn't over, not by a long shot." Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed Emma's hand and moved toward the door, keeping his body between her and the tactical team. They walked past Kane, past the guns, down the hallway past the family photos. At the top of the stairs, Emma stumbled and Marcus caught her. That's when he heard it, the soft click of a safety being released. "Now!" Kane shouted. Marcus didn't think. He scooped Emma up and dove down the stairs just as gunfire erupted above them. They tumbled together, Marcus taking the impact on his back and shoulders, protecting Emma with his body. They crashed into the wall at the landing, and Marcus rolled to his feet, Emma still in his arms. More gunfire. Bullets chewed into the walls, sent picture frames exploding in showers of glass. Marcus ran, charging through the living room toward the rear of the house. Behind them, heavy boots pounded down the stairs. "The basement!" Emma gasped. "There's a door to the garage!" Marcus saw it, half hidden behind an open closet. He yanked it open, revealing stairs descending into darkness. No choice. He plunged down, Emma clinging to his neck. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, shadows upon shadows. Marcus's eyes adjusted just enough to see shapes, storage boxes, old furniture, a water heater humming in the corner, and there on the far wall, a door. He ran for it, just as the tactical team reached the top of the basement stairs. Light flooded down, and voices shouted commands. Marcus hit the door at full speed. It was locked, but old. He slammed his shoulder into it once, twice. On the third impact, the wood splintered and gave way. They tumbled into the garage. The Morrisons' car was gone, probably impounded after the murders, but the garage door opener hung on the wall. Marcus slapped it, and the door began to grind open with agonizing slowness. The tactical team burst through the splintered door. Marcus pulled his .45, fired twice toward the ceiling. Not to hit anyone, but to make them dive for cover. It worked. The team scattered, giving Marcus precious seconds. He grabbed Emma and ran, diving under the half-open garage door into the night. They were in the driveway now, exposed, visible. Neighbors' lights were starting to come on. Someone shouted. More gunfire, but wild now, desperate. Marcus ran down the street, Emma bouncing in his arms. His lungs burned, his shoulders ached from the fall down the stairs, but he didn't slow. Behind them, an engine roared to life, the white surveillance van. "There," Emma pointed, a narrow alley between two houses. Marcus veered into it, the van's headlights washing over them just as they disappeared between the buildings. The alley was tight, too tight for the van, but the tactical team could follow on foot. They burst out the other side into another residential street. Marcus's rental car was 6 blocks away, might as well have been 6 miles. A car sat in a driveway, engine running, warming up. An elderly man stood beside it, scraping frost from the windshield. Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran to the car, Emma still in his arms. "I'm sorry," he said to the startled man, then climbed into the driver's seat and threw the car into reverse. "Hey, that's my car!" the man shouted, but Marcus was already backing into the street. He shifted into drive and accelerated, tires squealing. In the rearview mirror, he saw the tactical team emerge from the alley, weapons raised. But they didn't fire. Too many witnesses now, too many lights on, too much attention. Marcus drove through the subdivision, taking random turns, heading generally south and west. Emma sat in the passenger seat, shaking, tears streaming down her face but making no sound. "You okay?" Marcus asked. She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. Marcus reached over and squeezed her shoulder. "You did great, sweetheart. So brave." "You got shot at," she whispered. "Yeah, that was new for me too." Despite everything, Emma laughed, a small, choked sound that broke Marcus's heart. They ditched the stolen car in a grocery store parking lot 4 miles away, wiped it down, and walked to a bus stop. Marcus used his last bit of cash to buy 2 tickets to Missoula on the early morning Greyhound. As they waited in the terminal, Emma curled against him, exhausted but unable to sleep. Marcus held the hard drive in his pocket, feeling its weight like a talisman. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd gotten Morrison's evidence. But Kane was right about one thing. The fight was far from over. Marcus pulled out his satellite phone and called Grace. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus, thank God, I've been worried sick." "We got it. Morrison's drive. But Kane knows. He's going to come after us hard. Then we move fast. I've been making calls. There's a federal prosecutor in Seattle, Rebecca Stevens. She specializes in environmental fraud and corruption cases. She's agreed to meet with you off the books tomorrow." "Grace, I told Kane you had copies of Morrison's files. I needed to bluff our way out." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then, "Well, I suppose I'd better actually make some copies then. Send me photos of everything on that drive as soon as you can." "Thank you, Grace, for everything. Just keep that little girl safe, Marcus, and yourself." The bus pulled out at 0500 hours, heading west as dawn broke over Helena. Emma finally slept, her head on Marcus's lap, one hand still clutching his jacket. Marcus stared out the window, watching Montana scroll past. Mountains and plains, forests and rivers, all of it potentially sitting on top of Blackstone Ridge's poisonous plans. David Morrison had died trying to protect this land. Jennifer Morrison had died protecting her daughter, and Emma had survived 800 miles of hell to get here. Now it was Marcus's turn to make sure their sacrifices meant something. He pulled out the hard drive, turned it over in his hands. Such a small thing to contain so much truth, so much power. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake tonight. We'll find you. We'll find her. Enjoy your last days of freedom." Marcus deleted the text and turned off the phone. Let them come. He'd spent 12 years hiding from the world. He was done hiding. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmured something unintelligible. Marcus brushed hair from her face, and she settled again. "I've got you," he whispered. "I promise. They won't take you. I won't let them." As the bus carried them toward Seattle, toward Rebecca Stevens and the possibility of justice, toward a confrontation that would determine everything, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. Purpose, not just survival, not just existence, but purpose. A reason to fight, a reason to risk everything. For Emma, for Morrison, for the mountains, for the truth. The war was just beginning, but this time Marcus Reed wasn't running away. He was running toward the fight. The Seattle skyline rose through morning fog as the Greyhound pulled into the terminal. Emma woke slowly, disoriented, then remembered where they were and why. Her hand immediately went to Marcus's jacket pocket where the hard drive rested. "Still there," Marcus assured her. They'd been traveling for 19 hours, switching buses twice to throw off any potential followers. Marcus had used the time to photograph every file on Morrison's drive using his phone, then sent encrypted copies to Grace. What he'd seen in those files had turned his stomach. Morrison hadn't just found $300 million in fraud. He'd found $840 million moving through shell companies over 6 years. Blackstone Ridge Mining had paid off 17 state officials, falsified environmental reports on 12 separate projects, and illegally dumped over 2 million gallons of toxic waste into Montana watersheds. The evidence was meticulous, damning, and undeniable. Morrison had been a forensic accountant at the peak of his profession, and he'd built a case that could bring down an empire. if they could get it to the right person. Rebecca Stevens worked out of a nondescript office building in downtown Seattle, far from the federal courthouse. Grace had explained that Stevens operated partially off the books, taking cases that other prosecutors considered too dangerous or politically sensitive. She'd made enemies. She'd also put away corrupt CEOs, dirty politicians, and organized crime figures that others said were untouchable. If anyone could help them, it was her. They took a taxi to the building, Marcus constantly checking for tails. Emma sat rigid beside him, exhaustion etched into her small face. She'd been running for weeks now, surviving on adrenaline and sheer will. But children weren't meant to carry this kind of weight. "Almost there, sweetheart," Marcus said. "What if she doesn't believe us?" "She'll believe us. Grace vouched for us, and the evidence speaks for itself. Kane said he has lawyers, that he'd tie everything up in court for years." Marcus looked at her, this 7-year-old who'd learned too much too fast about how the world really worked. "He might try, but the truth has a way of getting out, especially when people like your daddy work so hard to document it." Stevens's office was on the 14th floor. They rode the elevator in silence, Emma's hand gripping Marcus's. The hallway was quiet, professional, lined with doors bearing names of lawyers and consultants. Rebecca Stevens's door was unmarked except for a number, 1407. Marcus knocked. "Come in," a voice called. They entered to find a woman in her early 40s standing behind a desk covered in files. She had sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, and the kind of focused energy that suggested she hadn't slept much either. "Marcus Reed?" she asked. "Yes, this is Emma Morrison." Stevens's expression softened as she looked at Emma. "I'm very sorry about your parents, Emma. What happened to them was wrong, and I'm going to help make it right." Emma nodded but said nothing. Stevens gestured to chairs. "Grace Whitmore sent me preliminary files last night. I've been reviewing them since 3 in the morning. If even half of what's in there is accurate, this is the biggest environmental fraud case in state history." "It's all accurate," Marcus said. "David Morrison was thorough." "I can see that. The question is admissibility. This evidence was obtained from a sealed crime scene without warrant or authorization. Defense lawyers will argue it's inadmissible. Even if it proves murder and massive fraud? Especially then. The bigger the case, the harder they'll fight on technicalities." Stevens leaned forward. "But there are ways around that. If Emma testifies to what she witnessed, that establishes probable cause for Morrison's investigation. And if we can get a federal warrant based on her testimony and the preliminary evidence Grace sent, we can make the full drive admissible." "Kane has people everywhere," Emma said quietly. "He said he has friends we can't imagine." Stevens smiled grimly. "I'm sure he does, but I have friends too. Friends at the FBI, the EPA, the DOJ. And unlike Kane's friends, mine actually care about the law." She pulled out a digital recorder. "Emma, I need you to tell me everything you saw and heard the night your parents died. I know it's hard, but it's important. Can you do that?" Emma looked at Marcus. He nodded encouragement. For the next hour, Emma recounted her story. The men in suits visiting her father, the arguments between her parents, the night the killers came, her escape through the window, her 800-mile journey across Montana. She spoke steadily, though tears ran down her face. Stevens recorded everything, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listening. When Emma finished, Stevens turned off the recorder and sat back. "You're one of the bravest people I've ever met," she said, "and I've met a lot of brave people." "Will it be enough?" Marcus asked. "Combined with Morrison's files?" "Yes. I can take this to a federal judge this afternoon, get emergency warrants. We'll need to move fast before Kane realizes what's happening." "He already knows we have the drive. He tried to kill us in Helena." Stevens's eyes hardened. "He what?" Marcus described the confrontation at the Morrison house, the gunfight, their narrow escape. "That was stupid of him," Stevens said. "Desperate and stupid. Attempted murder of a child witness. That's going to look very bad when this goes to trial. She picked up her phone. I'm calling the FBI now. You two are going into protective custody while we build the case. How long will that take? Emma asked. If we move fast, 72 hours to get the warrants and start making arrests. Maybe a week to round up everyone involved. But you'll need to stay safe and hidden until then. Marcus nodded. We can do that. There's one more thing, Stevens said. Emma, because your parents are deceased and you have no other living relatives, the state will need to determine custody. Normally that would mean foster care, but given the circumstances and the threats against you, we can petition for emergency guardianship with someone you trust. She looked at Marcus. Would you be willing to serve as Emma's guardian, temporarily at first, with the possibility of permanent adoption later? Marcus felt his heart stop. He looked at Emma, saw hope blazing in her eyes. I'm not qualified, he started. I live alone on a mountain. I have no experience raising kids. You saved my life, Emma interrupted. You believed me. You fought for me. That makes you qualified. Stevens smiled. From where I'm sitting, you're more qualified than most. You protected her when trained professionals dismissed her story. You risked everything to get justice for her family. That's exactly the kind of person who should be raising her. Marcus thought about Lily, about the daughter he'd lost 12 years ago, about the guilt and grief that had driven him into isolation, about how he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve a second chance. But looking at Emma, at this fierce, brave, broken little girl who'd survived hell and still had the courage to fight, Marcus realized something. Maybe second chances weren't about deserving them. Maybe they were about being brave enough to accept them. Yes, he said, I'll do it. Emma launched herself into his arms, sobbing. Marcus held her tight, his own eyes burning with tears he hadn't shed in over a decade. Stevens gave them a moment, then cleared her throat. All right, let's get you two somewhere safe while I start burning down Victor Kane's empire. The FBI safe house was a modest apartment in a quiet Seattle suburb, guarded by 2 federal agents who took their job very seriously. Emma and Marcus spent 3 days there, watching news reports and waiting for updates from Stevens. The first arrest came 36 hours after their meeting. James Sullivan, director of the Montana Department of Natural Resources, was taken into custody at his home on charges of bribery, fraud, and conspiracy. The news showed him in handcuffs, his face pale and shocked. That's one, Marcus said. More arrests followed. 3 state senators, 2 judges, a dozen Blackstone Ridge executives. Each one made headlines. Each one sent shockwaves through Montana's political establishment. The evidence was overwhelming. Morrison's files contained bank records, emails, recorded phone calls, photographs, and documents that showed exactly how the conspiracy worked. Money flowing from Blackstone to officials. Contracts rigged. Environmental reports falsified. Whistleblowers silenced. On the 4th day, Stevens called with an update. We've got almost everyone. Sullivan's cooperating, giving up names to reduce his sentence. The state senators are lawyering up, but they know they're done. Blackstone Ridge Mining is filing for bankruptcy, and their board has voted to remove Kane as CEO. What about Kane himself? Marcus asked. Stevens paused. He's missing. Disappeared 3 days ago. We have warrants out. Airports are watching, but he's got resources. He might have left the country. Marcus felt a chill. He's coming for us. You're under federal protection. He'd have to be suicidal to... He's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. I've doubled your security detail. You're safe. But that night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat by the window watching the street, the hard drive in his pocket like it had been since Helena. Emma appeared in the doorway, unable to sleep either. You think he'll come? She asked. I don't know. But if he does, we're ready. She sat beside him, both of them keeping vigil in the darkness. At 0300 hours, Marcus saw movement. A car, lights off, rolling slowly past the safe house. It didn't stop, but Marcus's instincts screamed. He woke the federal agents. We've got a problem. One agent checked the security cameras while the other called for backup. That's when the power went out. Get Emma to the safe room, Marcus ordered. Now. The agents moved fast, but not fast enough. Glass shattered downstairs, footsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Kane had brought a team. Marcus grabbed Emma and ran for the safe room, a reinforced interior space designed for exactly this scenario. The agents formed a defensive perimeter, weapons drawn. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. The agents returned fire, and Marcus heard bodies hitting the floor, shouts, chaos. He got Emma into the safe room, a windowless bathroom with a steel-reinforced door. Stay here, lock it. Don't open it for anyone but me or the agents. Marcus. I have to help them. Lock the door, Emma. He closed the door and heard the bolt slide home. Then he pulled his .45 and moved back toward the fight. One agent was down, wounded but alive. The other was behind the kitchen counter, exchanging fire with 3 attackers. Marcus saw Kane through the gunsmoke, directing his men, desperation and rage on his face. It's over, Kane, Marcus shouted. FBI's on the way. You can't win this. I can still take you with me, Kane fired toward Marcus's voice. The bullet missed by inches, slamming into the wall behind him. Marcus returned fire, forcing Kane to duck. Then he heard something that made his blood freeze. Emma's voice, small and terrified. Marcus! He spun to see one of Kane's men dragging Emma from the safe room. She fought like a wildcat, kicking and biting, but he was too strong. Got the girl! The man shouted. Good, Kane called back. Kill Reed and let's go. Time seemed to slow. Marcus saw the man holding Emma raise his weapon toward him, saw Emma's terrified face, saw 12 years of running, hiding, failing flash before his eyes. Not again, not this time. Marcus moved on pure instinct. He fired twice, both shots hitting the man holding Emma in the shoulder and chest. The man went down, and Emma scrambled away. But Kane was already moving, grabbing Emma, pulling her in front of him as a shield, a gun to her head. Drop it! Kane screamed. Drop the gun or I kill her right now! Marcus froze, weapon aimed, but no shot. Kane was using Emma's small body as cover, only his eyes visible over her shoulder. It's done, Kane, Marcus said, keeping his voice calm despite the terror clawing at his chest. Stevens has everything. Arrests are happening across the state. You killing us doesn't change that. Maybe not, but at least I'll have the satisfaction of watching you fail to save another child. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Kane had researched him, knew about Lily. You couldn't save your daughter, Kane hissed, and you won't save this one either. Emma's eyes locked on Marcus's, and in that moment he saw something remarkable. Not fear, but trust. Complete, absolute trust. She wasn't waiting for him to save her. She was waiting for her moment. And then she took it. Emma went completely limp, dead weight in Kane's arms. Surprised, he loosened his grip for just a fraction of a second, adjusting to support her sudden collapse. It was enough. Marcus fired. The bullet took Kane in the shoulder, spinning him away from Emma. She hit the floor and rolled, just like Marcus had taught her during their wilderness training. Kane's gun clattered away. He stumbled back, clutching his wounded shoulder, rage and disbelief on his face. You lose, Marcus said quietly. Sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights flooded through the windows. FBI tactical teams stormed in, securing the scene, shouting commands. Marcus lowered his weapon and went to Emma. She threw herself into his arms, shaking but unharmed. I trusted you, she whispered. I know, you were so brave. You saved me. No, sweetheart, we saved each other. Victor Kane was arrested on scene, charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, environmental crimes, and a dozen other felonies. His empire collapsed within days. Blackstone Ridge mining dissolved. Assets were seized. The Montana mining contract was voided. The toxic dump sites Kane's company had created were identified and cleanup began, funded by the seized assets. It would take years, but the damage would be reversed. James Sullivan and the corrupt officials pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony. They'd spend years in federal prison. The story made national news. Mountain Man and 7-year-old expose $300 million fraud, read the headlines. But Marcus refused all interviews. keeping Emma away from the media circus. What mattered wasn't the headlines. It was justice for David and Jennifer Morrison. It was protecting the land they died trying to defend. It was giving Emma a chance at a future. 6 weeks after Kane's arrest, Marcus and Emma stood in a courtroom in Seattle. Rebecca Stevens was there, along with Grace Whitmore, who'd traveled from Montana for the occasion. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the paperwork before her. "Mr. Reed, you're seeking permanent custody of Emma Morrison." "Yes, Your Honor." "You understand this is a significant responsibility, that you'll be solely responsible for her well-being, education, and care?" "I do." The judge looked at Emma. "And Emma, you want Mr. Reed to be your guardian?" "I want him to be my dad," Emma said clearly. The judge's stern expression softened. "Well, that's about as clear as it gets." She signed the papers. "Mr. Reed, custody is granted. Pending a 6-month review period, you may petition for formal adoption." Emma hugged Marcus so hard he could barely breathe. Grace dabbed at her eyes. Even Stevens smiled. Outside the courthouse, Emma looked up at Marcus. "Can we go home now, to the mountain?" "Yes, sweetheart, we can go home." The cabin Marcus rebuilt was larger than the old one, with a proper bedroom for Emma and better insulation. Grace had helped furnish it, bringing books and clothes and all the things a 7-year-old girl needed. Emma thrived in the mountains. She attended school in Clearwater Ridge, where teachers marveled at her intelligence and resilience. She made friends, joined art class, and still drew constantly, though now her pictures were of mountains and trees and hope instead of fear. Marcus started a youth wilderness program, teaching kids survival skills, respect for nature, and the kind of confidence that comes from facing challenges and overcoming them. Emma was his assistant instructor, demonstrating techniques and encouraging shy children with the wisdom of someone who'd survived far worse than a night in the woods. The town of Clearwater Ridge changed too. The story of what happened had spread, and people looked at Marcus differently now. Not as the crazy hermit, but as the man who'd stood up when it mattered, who'd protected a child and exposed corruption that threatened their land. Tom Daniels stopped by the cabin regularly, sometimes with casseroles from his wife, sometimes just to talk. He'd apologized a dozen times for not believing Marcus sooner. "You did what you thought was right," Marcus told him. "That's all anyone can do." Grace became like a grandmother to Emma, teaching her to love books the way she loved the wilderness. On weekends, Emma would stay with Grace in town, and they'd bake cookies and read stories and talk about everything and nothing. One year after the night Marcus found Emma in the snow, they hiked to a high ridge overlooking the valley. The sunset painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple, breathtaking and eternal. "This is where I come when I need to think," Marcus said. "Where I came after Lily died, where I learned to live with grief." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Do you still miss her?" "Every day. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. I think she'd be happy I found you, that I got a second chance to be a dad." "Do you think my mom and dad would be happy that I'm with you?" Marcus knelt beside her. "I think they'd be grateful you found someone to keep you safe, and I think they'd be incredibly proud of how brave you've been. I miss them so much." "I know, sweetheart. That never goes away completely, but it gets easier to carry." They sat together as the sun dipped below the peaks, two people who'd found each other in a blizzard and saved each other in ways that went beyond physical rescue. "Marcus," Emma said as they started back down the trail. "Yeah? Thank you for not letting me go. When everyone said to—" Marcus stopped, turned to face her. "Thank you for trusting me, for being brave enough to fight." She took his hand, and they walked home together through the gathering twilight. The trial of Victor Kane lasted 6 weeks. Marcus and Emma both testified, describing the night at the Morrison house, the attempted kidnapping, the violence. Kane's lawyers tried to paint Marcus as an unstable loner who'd kidnapped Emma and coerced her testimony. They tried to discredit Morrison's evidence as unreliable, but the evidence was overwhelming. The files, the bank records, the testimony of Sullivan and other co-conspirators, All of it pointed to a massive conspiracy that Kane had orchestrated. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Kane was sentenced to 48 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. He'd die behind bars, his empire in ruins, his name synonymous with greed and corruption. When the verdict was read, Emma squeezed Marcus's hand. "It's really over," she whispered. "Yeah, it's really over." 2 years after that snowy night, Marcus officially adopted Emma. The courtroom was packed with friends from Clearwater Ridge, students from the Wilderness Program, and Rebecca Stevens, who'd become a family friend. When the judge declared Emma Morrison officially Emma Reed, the room erupted in applause. Emma wore a new dress Grace had bought her, her hair in braids, a smile on her face that reached all the way to her eyes. She looked like a different child from the frozen, terrified girl Marcus had pulled from a snowdrift. "How does it feel?" Marcus asked as they left the courthouse. "Like I have a family again," Emma said. "Like I'm home." That summer, they visited David and Jennifer Morrison's graves in Helena. Emma placed flowers on each stone, her mother's favorite roses, her father's favorite daisies. "I got justice for you, Daddy," she said quietly. "The bad people went to jail. The land is safe. And I found someone who loves me and keeps me safe, just like you would have wanted." Marcus stood back, giving her privacy, but he heard every word and felt his chest tighten with emotion. As they drove back to Montana's mountains, Emma asked, "Do you think they can see us? Mom and Dad?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but I like to think so." "I think they can, and I think they're happy." The Wilderness Program grew. By the 3rd year, Marcus was training over 50 kids each summer, teaching them not just survival skills, but resilience, courage, and respect for the natural world. Emma, now 10 years old, was his most dedicated assistant. She had a gift for connecting with shy or scared children, probably because she understood fear better than most. One afternoon, a young girl came to the program, withdrawn and quiet, clearly carrying trauma. Emma took her aside, showed her how to start a fire, how to read the stars, how to trust herself. Marcus watched from a distance as Emma taught this girl the same lessons he'd taught her, the cycle continuing, the healing spreading outward. That night, as they sat around the campfire with the other kids, Emma told a story. 3 years ago, I was lost and alone and so scared I wanted to give up. But someone found me in the snow, someone who was also lost and alone and scared, and we saved each other. We learned that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. The children listened, mesmerized. Even the counselors were quiet. "So when you're out here in the wilderness and you're cold or tired or scared, remember, you're braver than you think. You're stronger than you know. And you're never truly alone if you're willing to trust and let people help you." Marcus felt tears on his cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. The Montana wilderness that Victor Kane had wanted to destroy remained pristine, protected now by stricter regulations and increased oversight. The dump sites were cleaned, the watersheds restored. Future generations would hike these mountains, fish these streams, breathe this air, never knowing how close it came to being poisoned forever. Grace published a book about the case, donating all proceeds to environmental protection organizations. It became a bestseller, inspiring other whistleblowers to come forward, other citizens to demand accountability. Rebecca Stevens was promoted to lead prosecutor for environmental crimes in the Western District. She credited the Morrison case with renewing her faith that justice was still possible. Tom Daniels retired from the sheriff's department and started teaching criminal justice at the local community college, using Marcus and Emma's story as a case study in trusting your instincts and listening to victims. And Marcus Reed, the broken man who'd fled to the mountains to hide from pain, became a father again. Not to replace Lily, nothing could do that, but to honor her memory by protecting another child who needed him. Some nights when Emma was asleep and the cabin was quiet, Marcus would stand on the porch and look up at the stars. He'd think about the chain of events that led here, the blizzard, the crying child, the choice to investigate instead of trust blindly. Every decision had mattered, every moment of courage, every act of faith, every refusal to give up. And he'd think about David Morrison, a man he'd never met, but whose legacy he'd helped preserve. A father who'd died protecting the truth. A husband who'd fought for what was right. "I kept her safe," Marcus would whisper to the stars. "I kept your little girl safe, and I'll keep doing it for as long as she needs me." On Emma's 11th birthday, Marcus gave her a gift, a compass that had belonged to his father, passed down through 3 generations. "This helped me find my way when I was lost," he said. "Now it's yours." Emma turned it over in her hands, studying the worn brass, the faded markings. "I'm not lost anymore," she said. "No, but someday, when you're grown and finding your own path, this can remind you where you came from, and that no matter how lost you feel, you have the strength to find your way." She hugged him tight. "I love you, Dad." It was the first time she'd called him that without prompting, without thinking. Just natural, organic, real. "I love you too, Emma, more than you'll ever know." Years passed. Emma grew into a remarkable young woman, strong and compassionate, pursuing environmental law in college with the goal of continuing her father's work. She never forgot where she came from, never took for granted the second chance she'd been given. Marcus grew old gracefully, his wilderness program becoming a fixture in Montana, training thousands of young people in outdoor skills and ethical responsibility. He received awards he never attended ceremonies for, recognition he didn't want. What mattered was the work, the kids, the land, the family he'd built from the ashes of tragedy. And on quiet winter nights, when snow fell soft on the mountains and the world was peaceful, Marcus would sometimes think back to that blizzard, that crying child, that moment when he could have stayed inside where it was warm and safe. He'd never regretted stepping into the storm, not once. Because sometimes the most broken people become the strongest protectors. Sometimes the most lost souls find their way by helping others find theirs. Sometimes tragedy and hope are woven so tightly together you can't separate them. Emma Morrison had lost everything but found a future. Marcus Reed had lost himself but found redemption. Together, they'd exposed corruption, protected wilderness, and proved that one person's courage could change the world. Not through grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but through simple acts of compassion, through refusing to walk past suffering, through believing a child when no one else would, through standing up to power even when it seemed impossible. The mountain man and the little girl, the broken soldier and the orphaned daughter. 2 souls lost in different storms, finding each other in the darkness, building something beautiful from the wreckage. Anyone can change the world if they're stubborn enough to stand their ground and brave enough to speak the truth. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to look away when everyone else does. As Marcus Reed stood on his porch one final time, Emma beside him, now grown and strong, both of them looking out at the mountains they'd fought to protect, he realized something profound. He hadn't just saved Emma that night in the blizzard. She'd saved him right back, from isolation, from grief, from a half-life of hiding and regret. The girl worth $300 million dead had been priceless alive. And the mountain man who thought his story was over had discovered it was only beginning. Because for Marcus and Emma, the road wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about legacy, about purpose, about proving that broken things could be made whole again if you had the courage to try. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible true stories of courage and redemption. Click to continue the journey with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe one person's courage can change the world.